Welcome back, WNST. All the time here for the next 5 weeks as I try to write letters individually, day by day, to various members of the Orioles organization to say what's on my mind. You know, I turned 50 this year. I've been a fan from the beginning. This is rock bottom. Clearly, this is a messy summer. This guy here has been an Orioles fan for all of his lifetime as well in the upstate New York range. He is now in Asheville, North Carolina, drinking very, very good beer and writing about baseball. He's a podcast host at Baseball Book Pod as well as Locked On Orioles out on Twitter, and he's the longtime Major League Baseball editor for Sporting News. Now independent in North Carolina. You can find him at J. McGuire MLB, and you'll see his Pie Trainer T205 baseball card image there, as well as 2 beers, a ball, and a glove. I'll bring my glove and have those beers with you. You're doing a daily podcast. You picked a really crappy year to start that, Justin, but I picked a really crappy year to start sports radio. It was 1992 when Peter Angelos took over 93. But this summer, I'm writing this Dear Orioles series because I sort of dreamed it up back in May to say, what was I going to do this summer to express my feelings about baseball and my 50th year on the planet and this horrific ownership that we've had here for 25 years. And this is the crossroads period of time where I think everybody that's been an Orioles fan, Jay, has been thinking about this. And what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Well, so far, they do what they've always done, which is nothing. And that's probably the most frustrating part of all of this is the lack of communication and the lack of movement when things are this bad.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed this before, I think several times, but the problem with the Orioles, it's very, very fundamental, and that's a complete lack of vision of what they want to do and what they want to be. There's no theme, there's no message, there's no grand plan. It's all just making it up as they go along, and the result of that is that they end up with teams like this year's team, which is just a mishmash of has-beens and never-weres, and Manny Machado. And it's like for things to change, it has to change on a fundamental level. And I think you have to, obviously they're at a point now where they need to just tear everything down and start over. But
are they capable of this? I mean, that's my... Right, I started this with Free the Birds in 06 thinking this greedy old man might at some point soften his stance and come around. He's never going to come around. He's the most miserable old prick there's ever been. And it's clear. And now they're going to apologize for him and push him and say, well, he's not of the right capacity. He's now... You're not allowed to shoot at him anymore. What? Well, then who? Who's responsible? Who's in charge? And, I'm writing... Part 3 of this is I'm writing a headline, and you'll appreciate this being a larger sports fan. Are you Rocky or are you Bullwinkle, John Angelos? Which is, are you Rocky Wirtz? Are you going to come in and breathe new life in this? Hell, Jim Irsay breathed new life into the Irsay name, 30 years after exiting Baltimore. At some point, someone needs to step up and run it the right way. I've been told if these kids were capable of doing it, they would have been doing it a long time ago.
Yeah, and again, I certainly can't speak to the inner workings of the warehouse, of the front office, of the owner's suite. But from an outsider's perspective, it certainly does appear that nobody there really is taking charge. That we don't know who's making decisions. Is it Brady Anderson? Is it Dan Duquette? Is it John Angelos? We just don't know. We know ultimately Peter Angelos has the ability to veto anything he doesn't want. Or to make things happen that he does want, but again, that's the biggest problem: is who's in charge, and they're facing major decisions over the next month, including trading Manny Machado. What are they going to try to get for him? Who else are they trading? What's going to happen to Buck Showalter? What's going to happen to Dan Duquette? I mean, these are all major franchise-defining decisions that are coming over the next 3 months or 4 months. And we have no idea who's actually making the decision.
My guess is none of them are staying if they have an opportunity to do anything else. This is a horrific situation right now, especially given the fact that Boston and New York have decided to get serious again. That's really, as much as anything, even if they were competent and they were doing a good job, it's going to be really hard. And I still, go back to the Yankees and the Red Sox and their bloatedness and, enough Hanley Ramirez's and CC Sabathia's and juiced up A-Rods and bad Teixeira deals and all of that stuff that that was as big a part of Tampa's success and the Orioles' success and the Blue Jays' 5-minute success as anything. The story there really isn't what a good job any of those teams did, although that's part of the story. One of the real stories is what a bad job the Yankees and the Red Sox were doing then, and they took advantage of those small windows. This is not that window, and it doesn't appear like that window's coming anytime in the next 5 years.
No, I mean, it's so true. The Red Sox and Yankees are, probably two of the three best teams in baseball. I think the Astros are probably the best team still at this moment, but I think the best teams are all in the American League right now, honestly, and they're two of the three. You mentioned the Red Sox had. People don't remember this now, but they had a period of finishing last place, 3 out of 4 years or something, not too long ago. The Yankees were never quite that bad, but they were, they weren't the Yankees that we think of. They were, winning 87 games instead of 107 for a few years. And you're right, there was a window there that a couple of those other teams, including Orioles, took advantage of. That window's not going to be there for the foreseeable future. And it's just as well that this is the time the Orioles are going to try to rebuild because, like you said, even if they were a better team than they are now, they probably wouldn't be competing for much of anything. So everything points to this being the time to tear it all down, start over, rebuilding your farm system. Don't worry about success on the major league level. Don't worry about signing retreads. If you're going to sign free agent pitchers, you sign them with the idea that you can flip them at the trade deadline, that sort of thing, which rebuilding teams can do. And that's, it's not hard. You can look at the Astros, you can look at the Cubs, you can look at 100 other teams, the Red Sox to some extent, that reach this point and they do something about it and they have a vision and they stick with it. And that's what's lacking and has been lacking on this team for a long, long time. And again, I don't have confidence that they're going to figure it out, but hopefully I'm wrong.
Well, the confidence in how they figured out, by the way, Justin McGuire is our guest. He is Jay McGuire, MLB, Baseball Book Pod, and Locked On Orioles doing podcast and trying to talk baseball here in this woefully horrible summer. There is a lot of meat on the bone here for what is going to happen. Parts are going to move or they're not going to be moved. They're going to accept the sandwich pick on Machado or they're going to deal him for whatever they can get and whatever market is out there. And I heard Arizona being thrown around today. But part of the issue is here who is evaluating the players. And, I think fans just think this happens in a vacuum, right? Like that these scouts and the international signing and all of the discovering and the discovery of quality baseball players, not to mention just identifying them, then having truly gifted teachers, truly gifted technicians and trainers in the organization that are going to take a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid and get him better at Delmarva, at Frederick, at Norfolk, Bowie, wherever it's going to be. Who are the people in this organization watering the plants, caring for the plants? That hasn't been a good story here either, of late. And so I don't know where the competence lies within the organization, but I remember the last time they looked to hire a general manager, they couldn't find anyone in the four corners of the sport to take a job. I mean, this is a Major League Baseball job. It's in a city where they have plenty of money, and they have a team, and they have a history, and they have a ballpark, and all that. They could not find anyone. It was so dysfunctional then, and Flanagan had just killed himself, and McPhail just said, I'm out, that they had to go to the Cape Cod League and find a guy who had been pretty much blackballed by the rest of the sport for a decade and brought him back, and it worked out how it worked out. It worked out probably much more nicely than we thought it would. Certainly Duquette tried to get out of here 3 years ago, wasn't allowed to. I mean, the thickness of the story and the narrative of it over 25 years, the real concern is who takes the job next. I mean, Joe Girardi, Bobby Valentine. The list is long. Lou Piniella going back a generation. Everyone turned this job down. Buck Showalter's one of the few guys who said yes. Dan Duquette's one of the few guys that said yes. They can walk out of here somewhat with their heads held up high that they actually did do some winning here. I don't know who the next group of guys they're going to hire that can come in here and turn this around under its the circumstances they're in right now, current circumstances.
Right, and I mean, I think and it goes back to what we were saying earlier, is we don't even know exactly what they want out of these positions, out of general manager, out of the manager. I mean, I think for a manager, whoever comes in next, you're looking at a caretaker, right? You're looking at the guy who's going to be managing bad teams for a few years, no matter how it works out. I mean, realistically, you're not bringing in somebody who's going to have a lot of success, and that's a tough sell. You know, it's always a tough sell. You maybe can get an up and comer who's looking for an opportunity, but you know, is any established manager, any successful manager, going to want this job? I don't know. And in terms of the front office, I mean, to me, it makes sense to go, if you can, and find a young up-and-comer, somebody from another, you know, successful organization who understands the modern game, understands analytics, understands the international market, and is, you know, going to put that person in charge and let them really make the decisions. But
no one here has ever had a job where they've really been in charge. No one ever.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you go back to Pat Gillick, maybe. I don't know. But it's certainly, yeah, it's been a while. And that's, you know, certainly been one of the frustrations of Dan Duquette. If he was willing and able to talk about it publicly, I imagine he would talk about a lot of frustration in this job. But yeah, that doesn't seem to be their model. They don't seem. I mean, they're talking to people like Ned Coletti, and I mean, you know, no disrespect to him, but I don't think that's really what you want at this point in 2018. You know, you want to get somebody who's, again, like I said, you know, you want your Jeff Luhnow type from Houston, who was hired from the St. Louis organization and has had such tremendous success there. That's the model to me.
But if you wind up hiring someone that can't get a gig anywhere else, it kind of speaks for itself. You've already hired someone who might be competent, but is judged by everyone else in the industry as being old news. You know what I'm saying? Like I have zero confidence that they can attract top talent because of their reputation.
Yeah, and it may be true, but I think they have to try. You know what I mean? That's what I would say. It's like, if it were me, if I was the one making the decisions, that's the route I would try to go. And maybe ultimately you do have a lack of success getting people like that interested, but you got to try, right? I mean, I think that makes more sense than going to the Ned Colettis of the world myself. But that doesn't seem to be the model for the Orioles. Ned Coletti seems like a much more Orioles-like decision, to be honest with you.
Just Sid Thrift's unavailable, I guess, at this point. Jay McGuire, MLB, is the way to find him. He's out doing podcasting, book podcasting. I guess onto the field and on to where they are right now and this woeful circumstance that they're under right now. And I don't know what do you expect to see over the next 90 days other than this sort of movement that they get 3 bags of baseballs back from Machado, and we're talking about whatever Juan Bell 30 years later that they got for a Hall of Fame player. They're going to want to crow about whatever they get in a deal for Machado, and I've been told by everyone in the industry to not expect that I should lower my expectations, and at this point 5 weeks out, most people don't think they're going to deal him anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, and I've had this discussion on my podcast, Locked On Orioles, several times. I mean, you know, multiple times, because as you can imagine, Manny Machado trade rumors takes up a lot of my bandwidth these days. But the thing that I keep asking people, and especially people who are not, you know, Orioles insiders, people who are sort of outside the organization, well, what do you think there's any chance they don't trade him? And everyone seems to think, well, it would be crazy not to, but it's the Orioles, so of course they might make the crazy decision, right? That's what we have to come down to. Is that any other team, you'd say absolutely 100% chance that he's going to be traded, because it makes no sense to hold on to him. None. And at this point, though, I agree with you. I wouldn't be shocked if they hold on to him. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes out the year with the Orioles and then just goes to free agency and they get the sandwich picked for him. I think they're probably thinking they're going to get more for him than they can actually get. I think Peter Angelos is stubborn that way. He doesn't want to get less than he thinks he's worth. But we're talking at this point a half a season of a position player. There's just even a extremely talented.
Jay McGuire, MLB, is the way to find him out on Twitter as well as at his Baseball Book Podcast. I'm sorry, Jay, you broke up on me just a little bit there, so I wanted to give you a little bit of room. He's down in Asheville, North Carolina. You can find him out on Twitter and at Baseball Book Podcast. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the connection here may be a little bad. I was just saying that trading him makes all the sense in the world, and any competently run organization would trade him. And
a company-run organization would have figured out they couldn't sign him 2 years ago and dealt him, right? That's where this would have been to say we would already have a pitcher and a position player, a major league player, maybe not a star player, but we would have gotten a third starter or a fourth starter, some sort of young pitcher, something that would have really happened a year and a half ago. Maybe we would have had Chris Sale, right? I don't know, right? I mean, there are things that could have been done here to keep the Orioles above water, but they've never, ever. The old man has a hoarder's thing, right? Like literally, right? Like he can't. They've never enacted trades in that way. Ever. MacPhail was really running the place for a little while. I mean, I would make a case to you that MacPhail had more power and more autonomy because MacPhail never came to the old man and said, I'm going to spend your money. MacPhail came to the old man and said, I'm going to save you money, and actually did. He's the only baseball guy that ever walked into the old man and said, I want a piece of the action. I ran the Cubs. If I can show you how to make more money, you'll pay me more money. And that's kind of how the MacPhail negotiation worked, from my understanding, 10 years ago. So that was a whole different thing. I mean, MacPhail never had to run to Peter because he was never going to spend his money. And Duquette has never really run to Peter because Chris Davis' agent did it for him, right? Literally.
Right, yeah. I mean, Chris Davis, that's a whole other issue.
That's a big issue. It's a $130 million issue, right?
Right. You're on the hook for 4 more years. 4 more years of on the field, and then many years beyond that of paying him with these deferred payments and everything. And it's you're talking about a guy who is literally on pace for perhaps the worst season in Major League history among a player who actually plays every day. Although I don't think he's going to play every day anymore. But it's just everything's a mess. And so you're talking about the next 6 weeks. Realistically, they should be trading everybody they can trade. They should be bringing up minor leaguers. They should be focusing on what the next step in terms of a manager is. What's actually going to happen, though, is I suspect they're going to tread water, just keep doing what they're doing, and then come to the end of the year, and suddenly you're going to have a lot of guys, both manager, front office, and players, leaving via free agency, and you're going to get nothing in return for any of it. And they're going to be even, I wouldn't say they're going to be even worse next year because it would be hard to be worse than they are right now. But I think you're going to look at another year probably similar to this without Manny Machado leading the way.
And I guess the other part of this is for Bundy, for Gosman, for Scope, for Mancini. The collateral damage for them and all of them is playing on a bad baseball team. I think the hardest part professionally is to get up and perform, and I know they all have that racehorse in them to some degree, but I think the one thing we've always seen around here, going back to Bedard and his bad attitude and what it did to Melvin Mora, who was a very, very good guy and a good ball player, and Brian Roberts in the early part of his career is, dude, it's enervating, isn't it? I mean, losing to young people and to be around this kind of dysfunction and the best player in the room, the guy you've aspired to be as good as Manny Machado, is dangling around, and everywhere he goes gets asked about being traded while the team blows 5-1 leads down the road. I mean, every single night being around it and being on the planes and being on the buses and seeing the fatigue, it's not good for the young people in the organization either.
No, I wouldn't think so. I would think losing is can be contagious, I suspect. And it's I think it's one thing. There's different ways of losing. And if you're losing with all young players who just haven't reached their peak yet, who haven't are still learning their way around, that's one thing. But when you're losing with a team like this, which is chock full of veterans who are either over the hill or underperforming or creating historic seasons like Chris Davis.
I want to see him bring like Tomey and Kingman back and just field like a whole lineup of designated hitters. Let's see if Albert Bell has 4 at bats in him with a new hip. Let's just bring them all in and let's see if they can hit 5 home runs a game. Maybe we can score 5 runs. Like that. That's literally what this thing. And I think we always knew that. Once it got bad, this is what it would morph into. It wasn't going to morph into them taking walks and moving runners along. When it goes bad for guys that strike out 225 times a year and hit 240 in their best year, it goes Chris Davis sort of sideways. I remember Gorman Thomas and Dave Kingman, dude, right? I mean, we all have seen this if you're a baseball fan.
Gorman Thomas would take a walk. That's the difference. But
I didn't mean to insult him. Yes, that's I only insulted him because he kicked our ass in '82. But other than that,
Yeah, it's true. This is a team that's just it's a bad team in a bad way. They're not. I mean, like I said, there's ways to lose that at least give you hope for the future. This is not that. This is a team that's just a bad baseball team with a lot of bad, underperforming players. I mean, Jonathan Scope has been horrendous. Trey Mancini hasn't lived up to what he did last year. The pitchers, Gosman, Bundy, they have their moments. They certainly show they're capable of something. And then the next time out, they get rocked. It's just there's no consistency whatsoever. Other than Manny Machado, and even he has been slumping a bit lately. There's no consistency on this team. It's just not a fun team to watch. And like you said, I can't imagine it's a fun team to be on and to be around right now.
So if you were to write a letter to Peter Angelos or to the Orioles organization, and I've tried to do it both ways. I'm going to write a letter to Peter because he deserves one and his record stands for itself. But I'd like to write one to sort of the future owner of the Orioles, the ethical, spiritual owner of the Orioles, and say, what do you owe the fans? If a new owner came in tomorrow, literally not named Angelos and just took the team over, what would that person do? If this were going to be run the right way, I'm trying to figure out what that even is with a brand that's this sick at this point. And I live here. I know how bad it is. I travel the streets. I know how people feel about this family and feel about these decisions and feel about the team. I know how they want to feel about the team and the pride they want to have when they put an Oriole hat on or whatever. But I often wonder, what will happen when these clowns no longer run the place? Like when someone else comes in, and whether that someone else is sane, competent, nutty, wacky, whatever, but if some Mark Cuban tech entrepreneur that's 44 years old who loved baseball bought the team, what are the first 5 things they do? I think the first thing you need to do is apologize for everything that's come before it. And to have people like me, who are 50 years old, that still have 20 or 30 years of life left to come back to the ballpark, to figure out a way to get a guy that loves baseball, that lives 2 blocks away, whose cousin's in the Baseball Hall of Fame and has dedicated his life to baseball and sports. How can you not have me in your corner? You know what I mean? Like how do you get me in your corner? Because I do affect 100,000 people's thoughts in the community, and I have not been treated well, and I'm going to be going through all the ways that people don't even know that I haven't been treated well, which would lead me to feel the way I feel. But all that being said, what would I expect of Kevin Plank if he bought the team tomorrow, or some mystery? It's not going to be Kevin Plank. He's broke too. But it's somebody that would come in and do this. How would you draw it up and start this thing from fresh if you didn't have the Angelos cloud hanging over you? And I often wonder that. I don't know what the first move would be, but you certainly would at least want to apologize and say, please come back, and we're going to be nice to Brooks Robinson around here,
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly the first step to me is always finding. It's like I've said already. You find that person, that man or that woman who you think is going to run your organization. Your Theo Epstein type, the guy. Obviously you're not going to get Theo Epstein, but who's the next Theo Epstein? Who's an up and comer who maybe is looking for that chance, looking for opportunity to run a major league organization? And you find that person, you put them in charge, you let them make the decisions, you build the farm system back up, you get back into the international market. That's a huge problem for this team. And in terms of public relations, that's not my area. I don't really know what the best approach to that is, but ultimately winning is the thing that's gonna bring people back. I mean, if you have a winning organization and a team that seems like it's going to compete regularly, that's the best thing you can do to bring people back, in my estimation.
He is Jay McGuire, MLB, out on Twitter, and Justin McGuire. He does a baseball book podcast and reviewing books here for the summer and the aftermath of Father's Day as we get ready for the beach time here, so you can check that out as well as his Oriole thoughts. My Dear Orioles series comes out this week. You'll want to check that out at WNST.net. It will be coming out in droves and days and spits and spurts as I write daily columns to members of the organization. I guess on the global scale here, Justin, and where we are. We talk so much about Machado. We talk so much about Buck and who's going to run the place. Boy, Adam Jones is sort of the lost stepchild in all of this, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I'm pretty sure Major League Baseball will not deem him a 3-year, $45 million deal that maybe he thought he was going to be getting at the end of all this term, or maybe he thought he was going to get a 5-year, $80 million deal. That's not where the marketplace is for him. I wonder what the trade marketplace for him is. He certainly has been a great citizen and a great player and a fine addition to any pennant race team. He plays the outfield. He's a team guy. I wonder how that's going to go over the next couple of weeks when they say to him, do you want to go to Cleveland? He says, yeah, maybe, maybe not. Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? Do you want an extension? Do you want to be a part of the future? I don't see Adam Jones sticking around. I don't think he should, quite frankly. But his story will be another story because I think people have much more of an affinity for him here than they do Manny Machado. I think he's a much more popular player than Machado.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Adam Jones has been, like you said, he's been a great ambassador for the team and for the city as well, and has been a guy that I always felt good about having him be the face of the franchise, being the go-to guy, whether it's, the aftermath of the Freddie Gray incident or whether it's, talking about Colin Kaepernick. I always felt like he was a man of great integrity and great, dignity and somebody who always knew he said things that made you think and represented the team in a way, like you said, that was very, very honorable. As a player, on the other hand, right now, he's just, he's not the player he once was. And that's not surprising. He's 30-something, whatever he is. He's past his prime. He's reached that age where players don't get better. they just, unless you're doing steroids, you're not getting better in your mid. I don't know that there's going to be a tremendous amount of market for him either at the trade deadline or in free agency. I mean, somebody will obviously be interested in signing him, but I don't know for how long or for what kind of numbers he's looking at. And it is a shame because, like you said, I think he's a guy that Orioles fans really like. He's probably, in some ways maybe the most popular player on the team since Cal Ripken, maybe. And it's going to be a shame to see him go, but I'm with you. It makes no sense for him to stick around. I mean, his stated goal is he wants to win a World Series, and that's not going to happen in Baltimore. So for him, I think it would make sense to get on that free agent, either agree to a trade at the deadline to a contender or just, wait it out, become a free agent, and then look for a contender that maybe has some interest in him as maybe even at this point, a part-time, fourth outfield or something. I'm not sure if he's a starter on a contender or not, but, I personally hope he ends up somewhere where he does win a World Series. That would make me very happy.
By the way, I love baseball nerds like you when I throw a Gorman Thomas reference out and you're like, at least he took a walk. And, of course, I Google Gorman Thomas and, you're absolutely right. He hit .215 with 32 bombs in 1985 at the end of his run in Seattle, and he took the plate 484 times and still managed 84 walks, right? So that is sort of the lost art form of the power hitter that takes a walk. Chris Davis was that guy, right, for a nice chunk of time when he was a good player. He was also a guy that would take a walk, right? Like, 84 walks, 88 walks in his good years when he's hitting 260. Even when he hit 220, he took 88 walks. That's over with now, right?
Well, I think for Chris Davis, honestly, it's all over. I don't think he's ever going to be a full-time Major League Baseball player anymore. I just can't see it happening. And it is a shame. And that's one thing. You touch on something there, which is, whenever they decide to overhaul this organization and start from scratch and bring in somebody new, emphasizing plate discipline and emphasizing taking a walk is really, really important, because that's even in their best years, even in the the years when they made the playoffs, except for Davis and maybe another player here or there. This was not a team that took a ton of walks.
Well, stat nerds would tell you it was all a big anomaly, right? Like that the Orioles could have been as competitive as they've been the last 5 years. There's nothing statistically that would hold that up, right? Like the way they play the game, the way the lineup is made, the way their starting pitching was constructed, it really is kind of a tribute to Buck and to whatever McPhail left behind and Duquette could get off out of the dumpster, that they were as good as they were for a couple of years, because statistically they shouldn't have been that good.
No, I mean, I think they certainly overperformed several of those years, and I always felt like this is a sports cliche that you hear, but I think it was apt in this case. It always struck me as a team whose they were better than the sum of their parts. You know what I mean? That they were a better team than they were a collection of individual talents.
Yeah, beer league softball and mediocre pitching, and all of a sudden you can win 95 games when the Yankees and the Red Sox stink. But part of that, to me, was the thing we never talk about, was defense. They were really, really good defensive teams that changed. It took runs away and helped pitchers. They were stellar defensively when Hardy was at the top of his game and Machado was platinum glove and Markakis is running around the outfield and Wieters is a plus defender and Adam Jones is in Stratomatic would have been a 1. I mean, I know you get that reference. Chris Davis was an outstanding fielder they had really good defense. That all went to hell. Once Hardy's back blew out, things really started to shift around a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is attributable to just getting older. And Adam Jones is older now. Machado as he's aged as a hitter and improved as a fielder, he has not. He's maybe gone down a bit, and that's fairly typical. I mean, a lot of players peak as defensive players earlier than they do as hitters. That's not unusual. And again, you lose a Markakis, you lose a Wieters. And you bring in guys who aren't as good, and it's just, this is a very bad defensive team. There's no question about that.
Bad News Bears. I shared the meme last week with Buck sitting there like Buttermaker. He is Jay McGuire, MLB. He writes about books and baseball and love of baseball and love of the Orioles at Jay McGuire, MLB, in the Baseball Book Pod. He's down there drinking the good beer and up in the mountains of Asheville where it's a little cooler this time of year. Hey, man, enjoy what's left of the summer. I'll be writing my Dear Orioles series. I'll come back and pick up the pieces of this mess. I'll be the guy. You'll get the text 5 minutes after Machado is traded. All right, let's talk about it, Jay. But between now and then, good luck with the podcast. Good luck with the All-Star game. I'm heading down to D.C. That's always fun. And we'll stay in touch with you, pal.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
Jay McGuire, MLB, Baseball Book Pod, as well as Locked On Orioles, out on Twitter as well. You can find me in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. My Dear Orioles series coming out on a daily basis here beginning this week. You'll want to check that out at WNST.net. It's also part of our morning newspaper, all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. It's also brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club in Laurel, where they're racing this weekend. They have the air-conditioned, beautiful sports bar there, all remodeled, great food, top-shelf drinks, and daily racing down at Laurel. Any breaking news and they deal Manny Machado, you're going to get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It is our best service. Been doing it for well over a decade now. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.